I went in because the alarms were lying. Orbit 7's sirens promised containment, in that syrupy, parental tone the station used when it wanted obedience more than truth. But the deck under my boots shivered like a fevered animal. The hull plates exhaled with a wet rasp, and the diagnostic fonts on my wristband kept flipping red, then pretending they hadn't. Containment my ass. The outpost was bleeding into vacuum and arguing with itself about it. I ducked the yellow barrier and slid through a slit in a collapsed bulkhead. The cut edges were still hot enough to crinkle my sleeve. Heat hit me like an opened oven. The air tasted of burned wires and bitter metal. Gravity hiccuped. My stomach did too. Unauthorized entry, a ceiling drone chirped, lens half melted, dangling on a blistered cable like a toy forgotten in a bonfire. Log it, I said, voice hoarse. I jabbed the cable with my gauntlets cutter and let the drone sigh into silence. Bill me later. My badge said, Systems Junior, 23 years old, good at fixing pumps and printers, not heroes. But when the first shockwave tore a hole through Ring J and the mednet choked, a cluster of vitals went dark in the ruin. One dot pulsed weird. Not ours. Valerie's signature? Hot. Alive. Alone. I followed the red hazard line painted on the floor, now half buried under ash. Smoke clawed my eyes. The corridor had become a throat. The station coughed around me. A vending unit lay on its back like a dead beetle, still trying to sell spicy noodles to no one. A poster floated by. Safety is a team sport. I pushed it aside and kept counting my breaths like payments I could barely afford. The bay opened like a cracked cathedral. Collapsed beams bowed in apology. Light from a damaged viewport slashed the dust into bright knives. A crate of ration chips had burst, silver packets glittering across the floor like fish scales. She was under a girder the size of a train axle. Valerie armor turns bodies into myths. Plates like poured moonlight, seams that look soft until they aren't. Her plating flickered, blue light blood seeping through spidered fractures. Beneath the helm, her chest fought for air. The beam pinned her at the hip and shoulder, the weight ugly enough to make me swallow hard. My fear tried to stand up and walk me out. I pinned it with my heel. I'm an engineer, I said, before I could be smart. Give me a chance. Her helm tilted toward me. The visor rippled from mirror to translucent. For a breath, I saw myself reflected back. Black hair plastered to my forehead, dust freckles across my cheeks, eyes too wide. Then the surface thinned, and her eyes were there, cold and pale as the inside of ice. My collar translator woke with a cough, then caught the language like a thrown blade. Stand. Back, it said in that clean Valerie cadence. Rupture. Danger. Everything's danger, I said, crouching. But that beam is the biggest liar in the room. Tools had spilled from a locker, little steel tongues sticking out. I grabbed a collapsible jack, a composite strut, a shard of polymer paneling for a fulcrum, muscle memory doing math faster than fear. My gauntlet pinged a structural warning. I muted it. The outpost hummed a low, unhappy note through my bones. Her hand twitched when I came close. I pretended not to notice the defender's reflex. Pretending gives people space. You push on 3, I said. Only then. Promise? The visor shivered. The translator hesitated, as if translating a scoff. Proceed. I planted the jack, wedged the strut, checked the fulcrum, leaned my shoulder into the least suicidal angle I could find. I counted like I was counting down a burn. 1, 2. On 3, I shoved, and the jack bit with a metallic prayer. The lever bowed. The beam lifted like a reluctant god. Every fiber in me hummed misery. She didn't waste the moment. She slid, teeth set, a restrained sound breaking from her throat, that the translator turned into static and old rain. The beam found a new home with a thud that rattled my teeth. Her armor flared, dimmed, flared again. Blue leaked and pooled, bright against scorched plating. I yanked my medroll from my hip and thumbed the emergency compound to life. It foamed, went glossy, and then glass-hard over the worst fractures, designed for hull patches and desperate miracles. On her suit, it fizzed, tasted whatever living metal tasted, and steadied, like a second skin stitching itself to a wounded first. "Don't," the translator warned, flattened by her breath. "Shh," I said. "Let me help." Stupid under pressure and stubborn on top. My fingers brushed hers as I sealed a ragged seam along her side. The armor did something impossible. A tiny tendril uncurled, tasted the heat of my skin at my wrist, and zipped back into the seam like a shy animal. The hair along my arms lifted, her visor thinned again. The translator found a careful path. Grateful. Evan. My name broke as if it needed to learn my shape. "Okay," I said, and felt something in me tilt. I offered my shoulder. She took it. Her weight wasn't crushing. It was trusting, and somehow heavier. We moved together through the bay. Step pause, step. Our balance negotiating new treaties. Overhead, a sheet of carbon lattice slumped with a tortured groan. Outside, another blast rolled the air. "Checkpoint," I said between breaths. 20 meters, red line. "Proceed," she said. The command collapsed to need. We found the corridor again. The hazard line was half buried, but still there, a stubborn ribbon. We fell into an accidental rhythm, our feet learning each other's timing, our lungs sinking. I could feel the low animal hum of her suit through my sleeve. It was trying not to tremble. She was taller than me in the armor, and hot through it, like standing near a working engine. We got 10 meters before her legs gave. I took the weight and pinned us to the wall without getting crushed. The armor flared, dimmed, spasmed once, twice, then steadied as if answering itself. "Almost there," I said, and meant it like prayer. My mouth tasted like pennies. The checkpoint doors had chewed each other, teeth of alloy bent and smoking. I slid us through sideways. Inside, 3 medtechs flinched, then stared. One had a shock of pink hair stuck to her forehead with sweat. A security officer started to say a rule and swallowed it when he saw the blue seeping from the Valerie seams. "Who authorized?" "Gravity did," I snapped. "She's bleeding." "Move." They moved. Everyone moves when a body makes the world small enough. The autolift chirped awake when I eased her onto the table. The nurse cursed my compound choice and then used more of it. Someone yelled for a Valerie translator, not noticing the one in my collar had already built us a fragile bridge. The med unit puffed sterile air that smelled like citrus ghosts. I stepped back, fingers refusing to unclench, and watched them claim her. A tech bumped me with an elbow. I let myself be herded because their work mattered more than my need to hover. Before they carried her through the inner doors, she reached. Gauntlet to glove, precise, deliberate. Warm now, not cold. Metal and skin made a tiny sound I felt more than heard, like a coin settling in a palm. The contact lasted 1 heartbeat. Maybe it lasted long enough to knock a hinge loose in my life. When they peeled her away, dust prints of her fingers stayed on my glove, like a constellation I didn't know yet how to read. Some vows arrive as speeches. Mine arrived as a bruise no one else could see. The outpost groaned around me, a tired animal learning how to hurt. I listened to the station writhe and to the new quiet inside my chest. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't big. It was a line drawn in me as simply as drawing breath. "I won't let you go." I stood there until the alarms remembered how to scream again. Then I wiped my glove, failed to erase the prints, and went to find where they took her. Because when a lie breaks, you go to the truth that scares you most and put your hand on it until it stops shaking. Or until you do. The medwing kept me away for 2 days with polite force fields and unpolite looks. In that time, Orbit 7 re-skinned its wounds in bright hazard paint, and the rumor loops braided 100 wrong stories about the Valerie woman I'd hauled out of the wreck. I didn't correct any. I fixed ducts. I tuned a shuttle's coughing reactor. I took long walks past the observation glass and pretended I wasn't counting doors between me and her. On the 3rd night, the rite began. Valerie Cruz had docked a pale crescent of a ship to our battered ring and unfurled ceremonial scaffolds across Bay Sea like bone lace. The station, starving for spectacle, turned out in borrowed clean clothes. The rite was public, a Varen renewal, our translators called it. Half oath, half maintenance ritual, where their warriors let the living armor drink from anthem tones. The tones vibrated somewhere inside my sternum. I felt the deck hum under my boots and wondered if the outpost itself was learning a new song. Lyra Saren stood among her own. I knew her name now because the med logs had leaked it like everything leaks here. She looked intact. The fractures healed to faint frosts, her visor bright as a moon cut thin. She didn't look at me. Why would she? I was a junior in a crowd, a boy who'd touched a myth and hadn't burned. The rite made a halo of heat around her. I tried not to stare and failed by a margin that felt like gravity. When the anthem reached its last held note, the Valerie line dissolved into hand clasps and clean, efficient embraces. An aide with braid loops at her temples found me with terrifying accuracy. "Evan Brooks," she said, voice as neutral as a scalpel. "Warrior Saren requests private debrief. Tent 3. I followed the aide between panels of white sound-damp cloth. Tent 3 breathed cool and clean. The walls filtered the station's noise into a hush, like being inside a held breath. Lyra was there alone, helm open, face bare. Her eyes were the same winter pale, but calmer, as if repairs extended inward. She didn't waste syllables. "What do you desire?" The translator left the edges sharp. I laughed in the wrong key. My face heated. Humor is a reflex I should have outgrown. "You," I said, quick as defect, because honesty is a bad habit when you're tired. Regret hit like a hatch sealing on my ankle. Her armor opened, plates parting along her collarbones with soft, capillary sounds. It wasn't play. It was sacred vulnerability, a door no one should name lightly. The air cooled on my skin. I put my hands up, palms out. "I didn't understand. I'm sorry." The plates paused. Her gaze measured me like gravity measures falling objects. Space thinned. Something important was about to break on a small word, and I didn't know which I wanted more, to take it back, or to mean it. Then the sirens remembered us. A breech klaxon tore the tent's hush. The deck twitched. Far across Bay Sea, a cargo airlock failed with a scream, like metal being taught how to die. The outpost flooded red. The aide ripped open the tent flap and yelled orders into a band, now vomiting static. Through the gap, I saw figures running, the Valerie tightening formation like muscle, and stationers scattering in patterns that looked like luck, pretending to be strategy. Lyra sealed her helm with a thought. She didn't look to her squad. She looked at me. "The debt binds," the translator said. "You're not my rescuer," I said, even as both of us were already moving. "You're bound," she said again, but the word had warmed. We cut into a maintenance shaft I knew too well, the kind of crawl space where repair crews go to swear and fix miracles with their knees. She compressed her armor at the shoulders and hips with a ripple that looked like an exhale. Plates slid and braided tight until she was a sleek silhouette beside me. The living link pulsed faintly, as if the suit were clenching its teeth against the pressure. I went first, because I knew the turns by knuckle. She followed, silent except for breath and the soft scrape of alloy on polymer. Dust tasted like old paper. My palm lights threw shallow moons ahead. We moved shoulder to shoulder, code silent. Valerie's scent, cool iron and something like rain on basalt, touched the back of my throat. Our breaths found rhythm without asking permission. My shoulders brushed hers each time the shaft narrowed, and the heat from her suit soaked into the fabric of my jacket until I felt warmed through, like a pocket stone. We made 20 meters before the shaft convulsed. A muffled detonation kicked the world left. A panel ripped free and blacked out the light like a hand over a candle. The ceiling crushed down in a dirty cough. The route behind us disappeared under a lungful of collapsed ducting. We were corked in a tin throat with the station trying to swallow. "Hold," I said, uselessly, because there was nowhere to fall. Her arms snapped across me. The armor expanded in a bloom, bracing against the walls, seaming itself into the shaft like roots into soil. She took the weight that would have broken my ribs. Heat bled through to my chest. I realized my heart was punching, wanting to be anywhere except inside me. The suit's hum climbed a note. She made a sound. Not pain, not yet, but like a wire drawn tight. "Don't," I started. "Quiet," she said, but not unkind. The pressure settled. The shaft continued to complain in creaks and small pings, like a cooling engine. We were pressed close, my cheek almost against her helm. I could see the micro scars the compound hadn't erased, fine white handwriting across the dark. The living metal flexed around me to make space for each breath I fought for. I did something I hadn't planned, the way people put hands on old trees for reasons that don't need words. I touched my forehead to her helm. "One more push, Lyra," I whispered. "With me." I felt it go through her. The translator didn't need to carry it because the shaft carried it. Our bones carried it. The suit carried it. A tiny pause. Then she laughed. Short, rough, unexpectedly warm. The sound softened the air between us like steam. "Command noted," she said. And it was a joke, and it wasn't. Together we moved. She retracted enough to let me lever the far panel with my pry bar, each millimeter a debt paid with breath. The shaft's skin tore with a low curse. We shoved through a seam into an older service run, a place that still smelled of original paint and the sour perfume of first-generation sealants. Behind us, the collapsed section settled with a thud, like a door resigning. We lay there a second in the new dark, my shoulder carved with the memory of her weight. My hands shook and wouldn't stop until I told them it was allowed. "You came for me not by order," I said, throat raw. "Because the debt binds," she said again. But the phrase had changed shape. The translator gave it to me warmer, softer at the corners, as if the language itself were leaning closer. "Also, because you breathe. And I can." I rolled onto an elbow. The light sketched the lines of her helm, the clean geometry that had felt like a wall and now felt like a door left ajar. I wanted to say something that wouldn't weld us into roles again. No debts, no credits. Just the fact that the station felt less like it was drowning when she was next to me. "Then keep," I said, stupid and true. "Breathing. With me." The pull between us was adult and undeniable, more than gratitude, not yet a confession. It tightened the world to a bright, navigable point. We crawled on, slower, careful, her armor still compressed to a sleek, vulnerable efficiency that made me ache with respect. Twice she braced the shaft so I could cross a buckled seam. Once I reached back without looking and felt her glove find mine. A brief press, as if confirming we were not hallucinations in the dark. When we dropped out into the auxiliary pump room, the breach sirens had fallen to a stubborn, weary pulse. The station wasn't safe. It was merely not dying right now. A hatch gaped toward Bay C. Through it, I saw Valeri's silhouettes moving in disciplined arcs, and stationers moving in the jittery math of survival. I saw smoke curling up the inside of the dome like a question mark that had forgotten its sentence. Lyra straightened, the armor reshaping in a slow release of breath. For a second, her hand hovered at her collar, over the place where the plates had opened for me, when I said the wrong thing for the right reason. "I didn't know what you meant," she said. "I didn't either," I said, and wished I could pull language like wire and make it useful. Her visor thinned. The eyes were the same pale fire. "We will learn." "Yeah," I said. "With me." Outside, a shutter slammed. Inside, something opened. We stepped back into the station together, not bound by debt, not free of it either, but threaded by a choice neither of us had the training to name. Our breaths, again, found the same count. And for the first time, I felt the world tilt toward us, as if Orbit 7 itself were relieved. Two small people making it easier to breathe. I found the shrine by accident, and then pretended I hadn't. Section J had a dozen ruins the spec sheets called cultural artifacts, and the crews called ghost rooms. This one was a bowl of broken pillars, open to a sky that wasn't sky, just the dome's inner glass, showing black, and the slow parades of ships. The air hummed with a note too low to blame on machinery. Bolts of bioluminescent gel lined the ledges, still alive somehow, still patient. Their light breathed, pale, then richer, like organisms listening. I carried the bundle against my chest like a contraband child. The hybrid cuirass wasn't pretty. It was pretend pretty. Seams too human, lines too Valerie, a compromise with screws. I had built it out of her shattered plates and station scrap, soft printing connectors in the midnight lab, burning my fingers, whispering, "Bridge, not payment," until the words had weight. The compound seams glittered thinly where I'd sanded them smooth. My name was etched inside with a laser scribbler, like an apology for existing. She was already there. Lyra stood in the shallow bowl at the center, helmet open, hair braided close like a map. Her armor reflected the gels in tender blues. She looked at the broken pillars with a soldier's stillness and a pilgrim's attention, and I realized spirit recalibration was not theater. It was maintenance for someone who had to carry more than metal. She heard me without hearing me. Her eyes found the bundle. "You brought a machine." "I brought a guess," I said, and tried to make my voice smaller than the room. "Not payment. A bridge." I knelt because it felt like the right height for a gift you're not certain you should give. The gels brightened, curious. The shrine's hum climbed half a note, or maybe my ribs did. I unfolded the cuirass on the cracked stone. Valerie living metal layered with human printed lattice. My best attempt at a grammar that could be spoken by two mouths. Lyra didn't move for a beat. Then she crouched, the ritual in her careful hands rather than in rules. She traced the seam where Valerie plate met human lattice. The armor under her skin shivered in sympathy and echoed the pattern faintly, like a throat trying a new vowel. "You engraved symbols," she said. "They mean nothing to anyone but me." I flushed. "So, everything. A joke engineers tell to keep from crying." "Teach me." The translator gave the 3 words to me with clean edges. Not a command, an invitation. I told her while she turned the pieces over. How the cross-hatching marks stress. How the tiny spirals remind me to breathe when bolts don't line. How the line of dots is my father's birth year. So I remember men who fix fences with less. She listened with her eyes, which is a skill the station tries to stamp out and never succeeds. When her fingers brushed the human lattice, the cuirass responded. A faint tremor. The living plate tasted the printed connectors and didn't reject them. The gels leaned brighter. I swear the ruined stones breathed deeper, or maybe that was us. We sat with our shoulders nearly touching. The cold that usually lives in station stone retreated 2 body widths. I unlatched my rough EVA breastplate and set it aside. "No shields," I said. It sounded brave and was mostly tired. She looked at my bared shirt, my ridiculous collarbone, the sweat at my neck, as if measuring the cost of such extravagance. Then she touched the plates at her collarbones. They parted a finger width. Not surrender. Trust. The air cooled across that pale, frighteningly human skin. The living metal thrummed the way a bird's body does when it thinks it's safe enough to sing. We talked to avoid thinking about the distance we had just erased. "My clearance band might as well be paper," I said. "I build perfect systems for men who staple them to broken budgets. I'm good enough to watch better people die when my good ends at the wall." "You were 23, she said, as if it were a military rank. "You lifted a god from me." I huffed a laugh. "It wasn't a god. It was leverage." "Leverage is a kind of prayer," she said. So gently it broke something and didn't ask apology for it. She told me in pieces, like someone testing each plank of a bridge, how high status in her fleet isn't the same as spared, how the code isolates the wearer inside perfect function, how orders too clean can sever the tendons of a person. She didn't ask for pity. She cataloged, and in the cataloging I heard injury. "Does it hurt?" I asked, nodding at the seam where plate met skin. "It hurts not to feel the hand that touches you," she said. "It hurts to ask for warmth, like a commodity. Status versus humanity." Her words made a theater in my head, where I watched her try to buy comfort with rank and watched it fail. I wanted to pull down every price list in the world and set them on fire with one of these bioluminescent bowls. "Here," I said, more abruptly than I meant. I took her right hand and set it against my throat where the pulse is. "No cost." Her fingers flexed once. The pulse counted both of us. The living suit thrummed in a new rhythm, like 2 metronomes syncing. Somewhere above us, the station shifted. Dust motes drifted like tiny, indecisive planets. A repair shuttle glided across the dome's glass, a moth against a field of distant cities. I lifted the hybrid cuirass. "Let's see if it speaks." She nodded. I eased it toward her chest. The living metal reached first, threads unfurling, tasting, deciding. Then the connectors I'd printed answered, flexing into that reach with a give I hadn't trusted till now. The join settled with a sound like a sigh pressed into a machine. The gels brightened so suddenly, the whole shrine seemed to remember sunrise. Lyra inhaled sharply. "It listens." The cuirass pulsed faint heat through my fingers. I could feel my own bad engraving, those stress marks and dots, reflected back to me in a Valerie key. The system hadn't rejected me. It had accepted us. "Not payment," I said softly, throat tight. "A bridge." She looked at me, not at the plates or the shimmer or the cleverness, and saw me. The attention was unbearable and unspeakably good. "Your mouth," she said, and then she looked startled to hear her own voice say it. "It moves before you plan." "Yeah," I said. "I'm working on that." "Do not," she said, and the translator softened it until it felt like a hand on my chest. "Keep." Words drew closer. Fingers grew bolder. I slid my unarmored palm over the edge of the cuirass, where my lattice met her living suit. She leaned into the touch first, just enough to feel. I lifted my head the smallest distance. The shrine held its breath, or we held ours for it. Her mouth met mine with the precision of someone trained to be flawless, and the hesitance of someone not trained for this at all. Careful. Warm. The living metal thrummed under my fingers like a chord resolving. My ribs learned a new way to widen. We paused with foreheads touching. Somewhere, one of the bowls flickered, then steadied. "I want," I said. "Me too," she said, quicker than I expected, and then was embarrassed by her speed, and then decided not to be. "I want to be by your side," I finished, because speaking is how you set the shape of a future, even if your throat shakes. By choice. Her eyes closed. Her plaits at the collar widened a fraction more in acceptance rather than sacrifice. She pressed her hand to my chest and felt the hammer there, as if to confirm the cost. "By choice," she echoed, and now the translator carried a gravity it hadn't earned until this breath. We sat a long time while the cuirass learned her, and my bad engraving taught itself a new alphabet. When we finally stood, the shrine seemed taller, or maybe we were. The ruin wasn't healed. The galaxy wasn't kinder. But the room where two people had been was now a room where a bridge existed that hadn't, and the station's tired bones absorbed that truth like warmth. We left together when the gels dimmed to their patient pulse. At the threshold, I looked back, because leaving is a small death unless you witness it. The bowls glowed once, bright as a nod. Outside, the corridor waited with its old drafts and the smell of coolant and human fatigue. We walked in step. Between her shoulder and mine there was a distance that had learned how to carry us. We didn't speak until the lift. Then she said my name the way she had in the ruins, but knew, taught, chosen, kept. "Evan." "Lyra," I said, to keep the world level. And Orbit 7, wounded and workaday, and crowded with people trying, felt, for a breath, like a place large enough for a vow. They came at dawn like a verdict. Orbit 7 doesn't have real dawn, just a schedule that brightens corridor lights to keep us sane. The shrine's bowls had thinned their glow to a patient pulse when the first boots stamped the dust into attention. I knew the cadence before I saw the owner. Command rhythm, unhurried, because it could afford to be. Commander Vestal stepped into the ruin haloed by her own authority. Her armor was older than Lyra's, less alive and more cathedral, every plane a policy. 6 soldiers fanned behind her, visors closed, rifles at low ready that still felt like a throat against the room's soft hum. "Warrior Saren," Vestal said, making the title a leash. "You broke the right." Lyra straightened beside me. We had not slept. Or maybe we had. The kind of sleep you get with your head leaned on a living shoulder and your pulse rediscovering pace. Her visor was open. It stayed that way. "Report parameters," Lyra said. "You can't rip rank out of a person without tearing flesh." "By code," Vestal continued, "your armor is seized. You are exiled from Viren service until remediation." I felt the room tilt. The living plate at Lyra's throat flickered with instinctive refusal, then held steady like a soldier at parade rest while bleeding. I don't know what looked uglier in me, helplessness or the decision to kill it. I stepped forward before courage could get fancy. My name tasted like copper. "Then take me too." The squad's rifles twitched and didn't rise. Vestal turned her helm a fraction, finally acknowledging the human in the shrine like a squeak in a hinge. "Identify." "Evan Brooks," I said. "Systems Junior, the idiot who lifted a beam and got a vow." Her visor reflected the bioluminescent bowls as cold coins. "This is Valerie Justice." I proposed a mirror debt. The word debt tasted dangerous here, but I didn't know another that would force the door open. We saved each other. Seize one, seize both. "No interspecies precedent," she said, like reciting a weather report. "No binding reciprocity with local fauna." The room held very still on the word, fauna. Lyra didn't move. I watched the idea of humiliation cross her face like a cloud and keep going. She had other storms to manage. "Then make a precedent," I said. Softer, because fury is loud when it's scared. Or pretend you can steal the ribs out of a person and have them keep saluting. Vestal's silence carried a weight I've only heard in engines deciding whether to fail. She gestured. 2 soldiers moved to flank Lyra, not touching, not yet. The shrine itself chose sides. Something shuddered deep in the floor, old stone remembering it was built to hold songs, not tribunals. The bowls brightened a fraction. The air chilled as if a door had opened behind us, and maybe it had, because the enemy chose the same moment to introduce itself. The first shell hit a support 20 meters out. Dust lifted in a soft roar. Columns cracked along hairlines, and then regret. Rifles rose. Instinct ate etiquette. "External fire," a soldier barked. "Base C ingress." "Shields," Vestal snapped, but she was talking to the wrong sanctum. The shrine had its own mind, or maybe I'd just been waiting for a chance to be useful. I pulled the comm key from my pocket, the worm I'd written to talk to systems no one wanted me near, and tossed it to Vestal like a coin you either catch or let brand your cheek. "Catch," I said. She did, purely because failure wasn't in her training set. I slapped my palm against the ancient control flower set into the altar ledge. The hybrid script I'd burned into the cuirass, the cross-hatching and spirals and dots, answered me like a lover learning my name in a new language. The shrine's pale field rose from the floor, slow and certain, translucent as breath on winter glass. "Choose me," I said, standing with my back to Lyra and my chest to the squad and the enemy and everybody else who wanted a piece. My mouth moved before my plans. It has a habit. "I've already chosen you." Silence found a throat and sang. The rifles didn't lower. The field breathed between us like a membrane deciding whether to be skin or wall. Dust settled on my tongue. Somewhere beyond the dome, a second shell thought about us, and then thought again. Lyra didn't speak. She stepped close enough that I felt the heat of her suit along my spine. When the Valerie talk about pairing, they mean 1,000 things I can't name. When she did it, it felt like yes. She raised both hands to the hybrid cuirass at her chest. The living metal unfurled slender threads like roots looking for water. My gauntlets, cheap station issue plus stupid courage plus stolen shards, answered. For a breath, nothing happened. Then the plates braided across the gap, a weave like fingers lacing. The join pulsed once, twice. My heads-up display spat an error in a language no one had paid me to understand, then steadied into a shared field of view I'd never seen and always wanted. "Partnership," she said, translator smoothing the word into iron. Not captivity. The squad saw it. Vestal saw it. I don't know if the shrine saw it or made it. Who cares? The pairing protocol wasn't a kiss, and it wasn't paperwork. It was a door opening that could not be closed without an alarm heard by anyone with a heart. Vestal looked at the comm key in her palm like it might bite. It did. My worm unfurled into the local net, handshook the shrine's old bones, and lit a ring of pale glyphs at the perimeter. Her gaze returned to us with the pure hunger of a machine designed for order, trying to digest an exception. "Stand down," she told her squad, voice flat from a slope she didn't like. "External first." Enemy fire obliged by hitting again, closer. A slab of ceiling fell with ceremony. The field held. The bowls went from polite to furious. The shrine sang its low note like a spine. "We're leaving," I said, because sometimes strategy is a continuous line through panic. I pointed at a half-buried arch, old transport tunnel stamped in a font no one uses anymore. Down that throat and left, then 2 levels to a motor pool the auditors forgot. There's an atmospheric relic that still dreams of mornings. "Unauthorized," Vestal said, last reflex. "Log it," I said, and wished the burned drone could hear me. We moved. The shared field made everything too bright and too clear. Her vitals ghosted on my vision. My trajectory ghosted on hers. Two people navigating as if we'd practiced. The shrine's shield peeled back like a curtain to let us pass, and fell behind with a sigh that sounded like approval. The squad didn't shoot us in the back because there were incoming reasons not to. Vestal didn't call for our arrest because she had bigger enemies to press her into better shapes. Or maybe because she was counting too, like me. Costs, breaths, outcomes that amounted to more than a clean report. The transport tunnel smelled like old rubber and the breath of machines that once believed they were immortal. We kept left. The pairing wove our steps into one gate. The cuirass warmed along my ribs where our bad engravings met, tiny spirals brightening as if laughing. Lyra breathed a little harder on the climb. I pretended not to hear, in the way you pretend. The person you love has always been invincible, and you would like to keep believing that for 5 more seconds. The motor pool yawned at us like a mouth that had forgotten words. In the dark, rusted hulks crouched like sleeping animals. I pinged the grid. One reply blinked back, weak but game. An old transport with stubby wings and ideas above its station. "She's ugly," I said, crawling under the belly to kick a stuck sump. "You'll get along." "Ugly survives," Lyra said. She put her hand to the hole, and the living metal reached, tasting, teaching. The old ship shivered awake with a cough that sounded like my childhood. Instrument lights came on in a random prayer that settled into a pattern. The pairing keyed us both into the cockpit without asking clearance. I sat left. She sat right. Our hands found the same liver. Enemy shells whispered distant fury. Vestal's voice cracked the net once. Orders, triage, a calculus that might save more than it condemned. I didn't hate her. I hated the math. We lifted, not clean, but committed. Dust boiled around the nose. The tunnel unspooled into a service shaft that promised sky if you believed hard enough. The old ship believed. The dome's hatch gave us one last difficult blessing, and then we were in the thin pale of morning, the arc lamp subdued, the planet below turning its shoulder like a tired god. "Trajectory," Lyra said, and I heard fear underfunction for the first time. "Sunrise," I said. It was a direction and a dare. We angled toward the brightening edge. War wrote itself across the sky in contrails and brief flowers of light. The ship complained in 4 languages and chose to live. Our hands rested side by side on the lever. Not a clasp. Not a chain. A simple vow taught to muscle and switch. Below us, Orbit 7 curled like a bruise. Ahead, the line where the light begins waited, rude with hope. He chose her, the cliché would say. But clichés are just true things that have been touched too many times. I chose her. In the cockpit's cramped heat, she chose me back with a pressure of fingers that could have been a command and was not. The pairing hummed between us, a net that wasn't a prison. Behind us, a system recalculated without consent. Ahead, a path fledged where there had been none. "By choice," she said.